Thank you for joining us today. I'm Debbie Gardner, Head of Marketing here at Snow, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. So we're delighted to be delivering this session in partnership with Electric Horse, where we'll be exploring cyber essentials and how organisations can strengthen business resilience through practical cyber security. Over the next 45 minutes, Stephen Goodman, our Systems Engineering Director, will cover today's cyber threat landscape, why cyber essentials matters, the 5 key security controls, some of the common security gaps organisations face, and the practical steps you can take to begin your cyber essentials journey. Whether you're just getting started or looking to strengthen your existing approach, we hope you'll leave today with some practical advice that you can take back into your own organisation. Throughout the presentation, if you do have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A panel as they come to mind. We'll leave plenty of time at the end for a live Q&A and answer as many questions as we can. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Stephen.
Thank you, Debbie, and good morning, everybody. As Debbie said, I'm Systems Engineering Director. I actually wear several hats, so I look after our managed services teams. That's both IT services and network services. I'm responsible for Snow's cybersecurity, information security, and data governance, and I also head up the technical pre-sales team. This event isn't intended to be a sales pitch, although inevitably there is going to be some salesy stuff in it. And for the purposes of bandwidth and all the rest of it, I will turn off my camera while I'm presenting. So we're here today to talk about Cyber Essentials, which is the UK government scheme for cybersecurity and business resilience, for really aimed at small to medium-sized companies, and we'll look at some of the background to that. But let's start with the fact that cybersecurity has got an image problem. Security in general has an image problem, but cybersecurity particularly has an image problem because it's based on preying on your worst fears. It's built on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Cybersecurity vendors will always present a worst case scenario. If you've ever been involved in contract negotiations with lawyers, you'll know that they do the same thing. They always reduce it to the worst possible case. The problem also is that there are no guarantees. I've been part of a project team. A few years ago, I was working for a FTSE 100 company. We were asked to assess the company's cyber resilience and our security posture. And we came back and we said we needed $6 million to implement, or £6 million to implement the solutions to get us to where we thought we should be. And we went to the boardroom, we met with the executive team, and the CFO turned around and said, if I give you this money, are you going to guarantee that I'm safe? And the short answer to that is no, you cannot guarantee it. The attacker is always one step ahead. That's why we have zero-day attacks. They're things that have never been seen before. You know, the attacker only has to be lucky once. The defender has to be lucky all the time. So there are no guarantees. Effectively, what we're selling with cybersecurity, or what we're doing with cybersecurity, is selling insurance. And people don't like buying insurance. Who on this call can say that they are genuinely happy to pay their annual car insurance? You know, it's legalized extortion, but we have to do it. And the challenge is that eventually it becomes a discardable spend. If I go back to that FTSE 100 company, we didn't get the money. We didn't implement the changes that we said we needed to be done. About 2 years after I left, that company was attacked and suffered a massive data breach. All of a sudden, much money was made available to fix that. Much more than we'd originally asked for. And although we can't eliminate risk, we could mitigate risk significantly by spending that money. The problem then is 5 years later than that, they're looking at the balance, their finances, and saying, why are we spending all this money on cybersecurity? So they start to chip away at it and cut away at it. And then 10 years down the line, you're back in the same position you were in originally. So we've got a problem with the industry, and we need to be looking at how the solutions are. And really, this is a business resilience conversation. It's not about cybersecurity. Another company that I used to work for was Cisco, and our CEO, former CEO now, was a guy called John Chambers. And he always used to state this quote: there are 2 types of organization, those that have been hacked and those that just haven't realized it yet. Now, I don't believe he originated that saying. I think consensus is it came from the FBI or CIA or somewhere like that. But it is true. 43% of businesses said that they had suffered some form of cyber attack in the last financial year to March 2026. And that wasn't just large companies. The split was even between SMEs and large corporates. In fact, if anything, it was biased towards smaller companies. And the threat is genuinely real. You know, here are some headline attacks from last year. Marks and Spencer hit with ransomware, Co-op Group, data theft, service disruption. Jaguar Land Rover stopped production for several weeks because of a cyber attack. We know that these things happen. We don't necessarily know the details behind them. And this isn't a new thing. You know, if I go back, older attacks, the Maersk shipping company, 2017, I'll come back to that in a minute. Colonial Pipelines, JBS Foods, Uber. Colonial Pipelines is a great example of where the cyber attack was on a non-operational system. It was actually on their billing system. And because of that, they had to shut down all their operations because they couldn't work out who had what and who they were going to bill for it. JBS Foods, a massive, I think the biggest meat processing company in the United States, hacked in 2021. Ironically, in 2018, 2019, I was in JBS Foods talking about cybersecurity. They decided not to take us up on our offers. And yeah, same with Jaguar Land Rover. In fact, I had very similar conversations with them at one point. And then Uber also got hacked. So there's lots of things that are out there. And if we drill into just one of them, and I'm going to use Maersk, although it's an old one, the reason I'm using this is because Maersk took the unusual decision to go public from day one about this. And so there is a lot of material out there around what happened, what the impact was, and how they fixed it. And you'll see at the bottom there's a YouTube link. The CISO has given a number of public presentations. That video is actually from Black Hat Berlin in 2019, I think, where he goes through the mechanics of it. And you can just see there the numbers of how many devices were affected, 45,000 PCs. And I think the figure is that within the first hour of the attack, they'd lost about 20,000 PCs. They lost all of the manifest information relating to those containers on that cargo ship there. They had no idea what was on what ship. They didn't know where it was unloading. They lost all of their information. And they were attacked by accident. The NotPetya virus was an attack allegedly by the Russian state on the Ukrainian state. If you do business in Ukraine, or at that time, if you did business in Ukraine, you had to use a state mandated financial package. Maersk operates in Ukraine. They were using that package. They were affected. And what this malware did was it wiped all of their Active Directory. So it shut down all of their Active Directory servers. And on here, it says the estimated cost of that breach was about $300 million. Verbally, they've said that it's nearer to $1 billion in the end of it. And how did they recover? Pure luck. At the moment that attack happened, there was a power outage in Ghana. And the AD server in Ghana got knocked off the network. The way that they recovered this was they flew that server from Ghana to Nairobi because the Ghanaian team couldn't get a UK visa in time. And then someone flew it to the UK, to Maidenhead, which is where their IT headquarters is. And then they started to rebuild their network from that AD server. But it took them quite a long time. And you would think this is bad for business. But because Maersk was so open and honest about what was going on, very transparent, their business actually grew after the attack. So as I say, if you're interested, have a look at that video. It's about 45 minutes, 60 minutes long, but it's very interesting to look at what happened and how they responded to it. And the guy that presents, Andy Black, I think his name is a very engaging speaker. So the key lesson is that cyber resilience isn't just about cybersecurity. It's about how you keep your organization up and running. So to move on to today's agenda, these are the areas that we're going to look at. I won't read through all of the slides, but all of those lines rather, but we'll just go on a bit of a journey through the whole Cyber Essential story and look at why it's important and why you should consider going down this road. The cyber threat landscape is increasing and changing all the time. Attacks are getting much more sophisticated. The big one is ransomware. By a long way, and a lot of cybercrime is actually organized crime groups. It's not nation state stuff. It's people trying to steal stuff, and it's because cybercrime there's very little risk associated with it. It's not like doing a bank robbery where there's all sorts of things that can go wrong. You can sit anywhere in the world and you can attack another company anywhere in the world, and you can make it so difficult to track back that you're almost invisible. So ransomware is definitely the top one. Phishing is often a way in which they get the ransomware into your organization. They send you a phishing email. You click on it, you open an attachment. Within that attachment is some malware. It gets into your network. It hunts around to find what it wants, and then it detonates and causes you problems. Business email compromise, same sort of thing, really. We've had this where a junior member of staff received an email claiming to be from our CEO, asking them to buy Amazon gift cards and send them the codes. That's a classic email compromise. And there's a whole load of stuff you can talk about in terms of phishing and email compromise. Credential theft, that's a clear one where you've just given away your credentials, adversary in the middle, man in the middle attacks, that sort of thing. Supply chain, this is an increasingly important one, and this is one of the reasons why Cyber Essentials is so important. It is true that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And if you look at a lot of these big companies, your Jaguar Land Rovers, your Fords, your Rolls-Royce, whoever, they have a plethora of very small suppliers that are providing them with goods and services. It doesn't take much for one of your smaller suppliers to get breached, and then all of a sudden it expands into your organization. We've had that with one of our clients where one of their subcontractors got compromised and they started sending out fake emails, and we basically had to block all emails from that particular company until they could reassure us that they had fixed the problems and it wasn't going to recur. And then you've also got the insider threat. We'll come back to that in a minute, but you shouldn't underestimate unhappy employees, malicious employees, even people that get inserted. This is extreme, but OCGs, organized crime groups, can go to this level of detail. If they really want to attack you, then they might put someone into your organization specifically with the aim of getting inside your network and being able to attack you. And why do you go after businesses? Well, businesses are very attractive because they hold all of this information. It's all publicly available information. Customer information, financial data, intellectual. Cyber criminals don't ask, how big is the company? What they ask is, how easy is it to get in? And you may or may not want to believe this, but most cyber attacks are actually opportunistic. There are lots of people out there that are just scanning the internet, looking for ports that are open, seeing what they can exploit. They haven't necessarily come after you deliberately, but because they've detected a weakness in your firewall, in your network infrastructure, they will come in and they will try and exploit it and see what they can get. 9 times out of 10, they want money. But intellectual property is another big thing to be concerned about. And another example, years ago, I worked with a manufacturing company, and we were looking to do some augmented reality stuff to help them do construct or build vehicles. We needed access to their 3D designs, and they actually wheeled a server in, and this server was never connected to a network. It contained all of their 3D designs because they were so concerned about a breach on that particular machine. That's where all their intellectual property was. It was a crazy way to do it, but that's how they did it. And the potential impacts are massive, right? And it's not just financial. It's mostly financial, but it's not just financial. Operational disruption, they can stop your processes from running. You can be liable for regulatory penalties. We're not going to talk about it here today, but there is a thing called the NIS directive, which was implemented in about 2018, I think, which was a European directive that listed certain market sectors, things like healthcare, telecoms, financial services, utilities, as being essential services. And they put in place a structure that said, you have got to improve your game in terms of cybersecurity. And if you fail, we will fine you up to 10 million euros or 4% of your global turnover, whichever is the greater. And that wasn't just about putting in place firewalls and IDPs and IDSs and IPSs. That was about the whole life cycle of cybersecurity. It's how did you prevent it? How do you detect it? How do you remediate it? And what lessons do you learn afterwards? Now, NIS the NIST directive, Network and Information Security Directive in Europe, has been replaced by NIS2. And NIS2 expands the scope of that massively into things like food production, food transportation. The UK government published a cybersecurity strategy late last year or early this year. They haven't really said how they're going to implement NIS2. I think they're watering it down slightly. But if you are a company that deals in Europe in one of those sectors, then you will almost certainly have to be compliant with the NIS2 regulations, because your customer will have to be compliant and it will flow down into their supply chain. Loss of customer trust and reputational damage, they are really beyond value. You know, if your customers don't trust you anymore, a company called SolarWinds makes a network management tool. They got hacked a few years ago. It was a side product. It wasn't their main network management product, but their sales tanked as a result because they couldn't, you couldn't be trusted. And then you've also got to factor in the recovery costs. As I said, with Maersk, that public figure was 300 million. Anecdotally, it's a lot more than that. And it's a classic case of prevention is usually cheaper and better than cure. Try and minimize your risk up front. Avoid paying out big money later down the road. And you can see the tagline there. It's about protecting your business, reducing the risk, staying compliant, building trust, and staying in business ultimately, because obviously, particularly in the SME market, cash flow kills. You know, if you suddenly stop receiving revenue, you've got a problem. So why should you look at Cyber Essentials? Cyber Essentials is UK specific. It is run by an organization called IASME on behalf of the UK National Cybersecurity Centre. They administer it, they put all the contractors together, the assessors and so on, and they are the people ultimately that you will go to for your Cyber Essentials thing. Why Cyber Essentials rather than, say, ISO 27001? Cyber Essentials is really about testing and proving that you are doing all the things that you say you are. With 27001, all it says is, I've got an information security management system. It doesn't necessarily prove that you are adhering to every line of that, whereas Cyber Essentials, particularly Cyber Essentials Plus, does. So it's about really improving your security posture, reducing the risk. It's a way that you can demonstrate with the logo that you are taking active security measures. I already mentioned it's required for many government contracts in particular now. If you haven't got Cyber Essentials Plus, you can't even bid for the work. It also starts to deliver better cyber maturity, because this is a, as you'll see later on, this is a journey. It's a never-ending journey, because things are changing all the time and you've got to deal with them. And also, if you're looking for cyber insurance, having Cyber Essentials Plus will help you with that. And in fact, if you gain these certifications, you get given a certain level of insurance anyway. So what's the difference between Cyber Essentials Plus? Cyber Essentials essentially is a self-assessment process. So you register with IASME, you get access to their questionnaire portal, you fill it in with all the information they ask for, and it is really comprehensive. It took us, when we did it, probably about 2 to 3 months to properly complete all that information. You then submit it, they send it to one of their assessors who says, yep, okay, you've ticked all the right boxes. We will award you a Cyber Essentials badge. Cyber Essentials Plus takes that to another level. So now, again, you register with IASME, or you can go through one of their partners, and they will come in and they will independently assess you. They will come on site, or they'll do it remotely, but they will log into your systems and they will make sure that you are doing what you've said you've done. You have no CVEs greater than 7. If you have got any CVEs, you know what they're there for. You know what the risk is, and you've made a conscious decision to accept that risk. You're not running Windows 10 anymore. All of these things, they will come in and validate. And again, when we did it, it was about a month for us to get through, because it's a live test. So every week that there's new CVEs being published, you've got to knock those on the head before they will sign you off. You've got to prove that you're making it work. So it is a really practical, Cyber Essentials Plus is a really practical assessment of your cybersecurity posture, which makes it much better than some of the other options that are out there. That bottom line is actually changed. I don't believe now that you can go straight to Cyber Essentials Plus. I think you have to go through Cyber Essentials first before you can go to Cyber Essentials Plus. And I think that that's because a lot of people are doing Cyber Essentials Plus and failing because they hadn't done the self-assessment. If you want to do it, if you go to the NCSC website and look at Cyber Essentials, there is an online questionnaire that you can fill in. It's a pre-assessment, if you like, and it will give you an indication of the areas that you might need to look at. A classic one is mobile device management. If you are allowing your users to access your corporate email and collaboration software, whether that's Teams or WebEx or whatever, on their personal devices, you need a way to manage those devices. You need to manage and protect your data that exists on those devices. If that person leaves your company, you need a mechanism to make sure that your data is deleted from that person's mobile device. And that is one of the toughest areas to get through on Cyber Essentials Plus in our experience. So what does Cyber Essentials ask for? It focuses on 5 key areas: your firewalls, secure configuration, user access control, malware protection, and security update management. And we'll go through each of those now in a little bit more detail. There's a lot of words on these slides. I'm not going to go through all of the words, but we will make these slides available to you afterwards, and you can always contact us after if you've got any further questions once this event has finished. So let's look at firewalls. So for most organizations, the firewall is their first point of contact with the internet. And for the SME market, this is a particularly challenging one because often their firewall is provided by their ISP or their network provider, and it is, let's say, cheap and cheerful, not necessarily kept up to date, and no one really takes ownership of it. But it is your first blocking point and your first detection point for any attempts to get into your network personally or from externally. And there are a number of key hygiene things that you can do. You can remove unused rules, you can disable unnecessary ports. So really, you probably only need 2 or 3 ports to be open across your estate. Port 80, port 443, port 8080. In fact, you don't even want to use port 80 really because that's insecure. Review your firewall rules. We see time and time again organizations where their rule set has become so massive and unwieldy that somewhere there will be a line that says allow any, which basically bypasses everything that you've put in the system. So you should really be denying everything except that traffic that you want to get through to your network. And then the other area is around remote access. How do you allow your workers, your colleagues to access your internal applications, your internal tools? It's a slightly different story if you're cloud-based. So we're a Microsoft house. Most of our information is cloud-based services, whether that's Office 365, SharePoint, OneDrive, et cetera. So remote access into those is slightly different. But if you've got on-prem services, servers, devices, then you need to be thinking very carefully about how you allow people to access those from outside your office location and what levels of security you're going to put around it. Secure configuration is really around the software and the applications that you're running and how you configure them and how you manage them. So if you're not using software, remove it. Commonly when you buy a new laptop, it will come with a whole load of bloatware that the manufacturer's put on there. Really think long and hard about whether you need that. Often it's better to just wipe it and put a gold image, a standard image on without all of that noise and clutter. Certain manufacturers are worse at this than others, but it's worth bearing in mind. And if you've retired software, you no longer use it in your organization, have a way to remove it from everyone's machine. Because if you're not monitoring that software and there aren't updates happening to it, then it presents a possible intrusion point. Similarly, disable unnecessary services. As I said, you probably don't need all of the 1,000 ports open. Just limit it to what you really need. Make sure you don't keep any default passwords. How many times have you looked at a thing and said, "Oh, it's admin," and it's been right? Make sure that you've changed all your default passwords, especially for anything that has administrative access, which we'll talk about again in a second. Cloud services, you can't really test cloud services. No one's going to let you do that. Microsoft is not going to let you do a penetration test on Office 365 or Azure. What they will give you is a certificate of attestation that you can then use for your cyber insurance and so on and so forth. And then finally, encrypt your devices. If you're not using BitLocker or something like that on your devices and that device gets stolen, then all of your data has been stolen as well. So you really need to have all of your endpoints encrypted as far as possible. The third area is around user access control. And this is where it gets really interesting, in fact. Apply principles of least privilege. People should only have the access level that they need. No more, no less. You will need administrators. Your administrators should have a completely separate account that is unlicensed, an account that they cannot use for day-to-day operation. Because if they're using it for day-to-day operation, it becomes very easy to make a mistake, forget you're doing that, and all of a sudden you've opened something up. So your administration accounts should have separate, your administrators should have separate accounts, and those accounts should have an appropriate level of security applied, which is the next level here, multi-factor authentication. Wherever possible, use multi-factor authentication. If you look in the press, the National Cybersecurity Centre fairly recently issued new guidelines on password management. You know, it used to be needs to be more than 8 characters, uppercase, lowercase, number, symbol, change it on a regular basis. They're now saying actually that's driving bad behavior. So go for one really secure password, a passphrase, a bit like what 3 words, if you're familiar with that application. 3 random words strung together, very difficult to guess, very difficult to crack. But equally, move to multi-factor authentication. And for your admin accounts, move towards phish-resistant authentication. That takes it to another level. So if you've got phish-resistant authentication, it not only tests that you've got an authenticator app, it also ensures that you've got that authenticator app in front of you when you fill it in. So it's providing another level of security. And being on the receiving end of this, I can tell you it is a pain having to go through phish-resistant MFA, but it's necessary. It's for the benefit of the company. Make sure that you've got an offboarding process for when leavers leave your company. Immediately block their login, shut down. This all sounds, yeah, it is just common sense, but you'll be surprised how many times we talk to a company and there's loads of accounts in there that of people that have left and that potentially could still dial in from outside or log in from outside. So undoubtedly you will have an onboarding process. Make sure you've got an offboarding process as well that removes all their access to the systems. And then I've already mentioned passwords, so I won't talk about that again. Malware protection, antivirus, endpoint detection response, all of these things, you know, you need to be managing. That's why there was the big push at the back end of last year to get people off of Windows 10 to Windows 11. You know, security support and updates for Windows 10 was going to stop, I think October of last year around that time. So that if you're still running Windows 10, there has been no updates on their security since, you know, for nearly 9 months now. And in that 9 months, you can bet that there are exploits that have come out to target Windows 10 machines. So you need to make sure that, you know, all of your antivirus, all of your anti-malware is up to date and correct, that you've got sort of email filtering, so you can do whitelisting, you can do blacklisting, just get all of the noise out, anti-spam type filtering and that sort of thing. Have in place DLP, data leakage protection. Look at the information that's going out of your company. Often that's a way to find data exfiltration, is by looking at the type of information that's being sent out. Web filtering, there are certain domains, there are certain countries that you probably don't want to be connected to or you have no need to connect to. If you can, on your firewall, block access to those countries. Relatively easy to do. Yeah, there are certain countries that are known for scanning the internet to try and find weak points. You know, if you block traffic coming from those countries, then you help yourselves. Of course, the problem is that they're quite smart, so they won't come from their own country usually. They will route it through another country on their way to get to you. And the final one, and this is a big one, user awareness. I will pick that up on a separate slide in a minute or two. Security update management, this is all about patching your devices, making sure your devices have got all the latest patches and security updates, not just for the operating system, but also for all of the applications that you run. There are a number of versions of Python, for example, that are very, very weak and very, very susceptible to problems or exploits. Make sure that you are running the latest. In our case, we were running a GIS platform, and the Python that was built into that was an old version that they had no intention of updating. We had to stop using that version of GIS or that product because they would not release an updated version, and it was a CVE 9. If you're familiar with CVEs, they have a scale. And with Cyber Essentials, if you've got any CVEs greater than 7, it's an automatic fail. So you need to be really, really looking at that sort of stuff, not just operating systems, but also the applications that you use. What are the key gaps that we see? I won't go through all these in detail, but you can read them yourselves. It's all the things that we've just talked about: weak passwords, no MFA, unsupported systems, administrators. I said about least privilege for your users. That also applies to administrators. Don't give everybody global admin rights. Certainly Microsoft, AWS, they will allow you to break it down so you can be an administrator, but only of a particular part of the infrastructure. Also, beware of shadow IT. These are the guys that are out there writing their own little bit of code to help themselves, but you don't know about it, you don't control it, you don't know what security has been applied to it. So there's a whole load of stuff there. And then we come on to the human risk. Users need to be trained, and they need to be trained regularly. Now, we happen to be a user and reseller of some software called KnowBe4, which is all about cybersecurity and ethics and other training. Our staff every month get about 30 minutes of training on cybersecurity. Every 6 months, we do an assessment. We simulate phishing attacks on a regular basis, right, to help them. And in these days of AI, phishing emails are surprisingly sophisticated and actually quite difficult to detect. All of these other things, social engineering, persuading people to give up passwords is a good one. Fake invoices is another good one. In this instance, what they'll do, a cyber criminal will send you a fake invoice, see if you pay it. If you pay it, then you've suddenly become a cash machine. They will continue to send you invoices until someone says, what is this we're paying for? And they won't necessarily be high value invoices, because it's much easier to steal £1 from 1 million people than it is to steal £1 million from one person. So they will do that. CEO fraud, I already mentioned that, where we had an email purporting to be from our CEO to a junior member of staff asking them to buy Amazon tokens. Yeah, that's a classic one. And then password theft. Many ways of doing that, bribery, whatever, because ultimately you are the weakest link in all of this. We can put all the technical controls in place that you want. We can put all the process in place that you want. But if you don't get the people on board, you have a problem. And don't kid yourselves. Everybody has a secret. Everybody has a price. Everybody has something that they don't want exposed in public. In my case, my weakness is Sainsbury's apple turnovers, right? And for a lifetime supply of Sainsbury's apple turnovers, as long as they don't change the recipe, I'd probably sell my own mother. I should say other apple turnovers are available, but in my opinion, Sainsbury's ones are the best. Everyone's got a price. Everyone's got a secret. And I used to advise people when I was doing this, have a look at the TV series Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot, the first season of that, is fantastic for cybercrime. It shows loads of everything that they did was genuine. It had been done in real world. And their problem was actually, how did they make it so that you couldn't replicate it by taking it from television? But you'll see lots of stuff in there about human exploits. If you want to test it, leave a USB stick with your CEO or managing director's name on it somewhere on a desk, and I guarantee someone will pick that up and plug that into their machine. Every time that will happen. People are the weakest link in this whole story. So what do we do next? Well, really, we remediate all of the things I've just been talking about for the last 25 minutes or so. Enable MFA, use password managers, don't write passwords in a book. Have a proper, they're not expensive, even at a corporate level. Get a proper password management system that you can control, because again, once someone leaves your company, you don't want them taking all your passwords with you, and you don't want to have to go through the process of resetting them. So have a password manager and block their access. Remove unused accounts, all things that I've already talked about, so I won't repeat them here. So how do you start your Cyber Essentials journey? The first thing is to really understand your IT estate. If you don't know what's there, how can you manage it? So you need to do an audit of all your devices, documents, people, users, etc. Then review that against the Cyber Essentials requirements. As I said, the NCSC website has a handy questionnaire that you can go through to see where you are going. Work through and address those identified gaps. Now, I have to be honest here and say that the initial cyber assessment that's on the website is nowhere near as detailed as the real one. So once you get the real one through, you will find there's a lot more stuff. You might think you're in a good position, you'll find that there's a lot more stuff to do. And then once you've got your Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus, you then need to keep that going throughout, because cyber security is a journey. It's not the destination. You've got to keep moving. The market, the infrastructure, the attack profile is changing all the time, and you need to be getting better, right? When I do these presentations in purpose, I have a slide which is a camouflage sniper, and I ask you to identify the sniper. It doesn't work on a Teams presentation, but it's just to illustrate the fact once someone's in your network, they don't have to attack you immediately. They can just sit there for ages, working, looking, scanning, seeing where they can get to before they do any damage, right? Even if you clean up, if you get attacked, even after you clean up, you can never be sure that they haven't left something there that's dormant, that's going to come back to life in the future. So really, as I said earlier, prevention is much better than cure. Spend the money, put in place the systems up front to help you detect and monitor your networks, guard against intrusion, because that is much easier and much better than having to try and clean up a mess afterwards. So that is the end of my presentation. I think I've run just slightly over. Thank you for listening. We're happy to take any questions at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. That was a really insightful presentation, and hopefully it's given everyone a clearer understanding of Cyber Essentials. So I've got a couple of questions for you here, if you're happy to take them.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest misconception organisations have about Cyber Essentials?
This is going to sound strange, but a lot of people go into it thinking it's quite easy to achieve, and it isn't. You have to put the work in, and you have to demonstrate that you've put the work in. You shouldn't. Cyber Essentials is well worth doing, but you shouldn't underestimate the amount of time and effort it's going to take you to get to a state where you can earn that badge. It's not given away. So that's probably the biggest misconception, that it is relatively easy to achieve.
Okay, thank you. And next question is, what's the most common reason organisations don't achieve certification the first time?
Oh, that's a good one. Usually, again, this is in our experience, others might vary. I mentioned it earlier, mobile device management. We allow our employees to access company applications on their mobile devices, their personal mobile devices, and we don't take the steps to secure that data. Now, there are different ways, and in fact, one of the issues that Cyber Essentials had, so there are two ways to do mobile device management. There is proper mobile device management, which is where you deploy a MDM client onto that endpoint, and basically it gives the organization God rights. If I want to wipe your device, I will wipe your device. And very few users are willing to sign up to that. The second option, and the easiest option, is to go down the managed applications route. So what you say there is, I'm going to allow you to access your email and chat on your personal device, but you can only do it using my approved application. So you've got to use Microsoft Outlook, you've got to use Microsoft Teams. By doing managed applications, if you leave the company, as soon as I disable your access to Office 365, all of that data gets removed from your machine. So I can manage the data that you can see. And you can take it even further. So I can stop you from copying and pasting from a managed app into another app. So you can't do screen. I can stop you doing screenshots. So that's usually the area that people are the weakest. They haven't looked at all of the mobile devices. They think about laptops, desktops, servers, that sort of thing, but they forget about all of the mobile devices.
Okay. And then how often should organisations review their cyber essentials controls after they've achieved certification?
It's really an ongoing process, so you need to be doing it all the time. It's difficult to provide. You need to be looking at all of your suppliers, your equipment suppliers, whether that's your hardware, whether that's your software, monitoring for any updates and patches that come out for those and applying them. I mean, don't be daft and just apply them willy-nilly. We've all been on the wrong end of, patches that a company has issued, and they clean up one problem and they create others. So you need to test it, but really this isn't something that you can stop. You need someone looking at this all the time, which is what we do. We have an analyst that is basically permanently looking at our posture, permanently looking in Microsoft Entra, Intune. Datto RMM is the tool that we use for device management. Just making sure that all of our devices are constantly in compliance. It's not a massive overhead, but you need to be doing it all the time. It's not something, okay, I've got the badge, I'll do it in 3 months' time or 6 months' time, because the world changes in 3 months.
Lovely. What advice would you give to organisations that are worried they'll fail the assessment?
Don't be worried. If you prepare properly and if you have the right advisors, and I should state at this point, so IASME does have a cyber advisor organization. So we don't have that at the moment. We can advise you, but we cannot officially advise you. We cannot complete the survey on your behalf. But really, you will fail. Right? Initially, you will fail, and it's all about the preparation. Once you've done it, once you've done that initial audit and you've understood where the gaps are, and you start to close them, if you've done all the work up front, you should not fail. But be prepared for a lot of work to get to that point.
Okay, thank you. We've got 1 more minute, so one more question. Cyber Essentials is often associated with smaller organisations. Is it just as relevant for larger businesses?
It's a good question. And in my opinion, yes, it is, because Cyber Essentials is really about cyber hygiene, and it's the things that big companies should be doing anyway. I think the reason why this is aimed at smaller organizations is because generally they don't have dedicated IT teams or dedicated security teams. If you look at a big organization like Rolls-Royce or Severn Trent or Thames Water, they will have big teams of people that are focused on cybersecurity. In a smaller company, it tends to be someone doing a job as in addition to their regular role. So, it was recognised by the government that cybersecurity wasn't necessarily managed as well in smaller companies, so that's why it's really targeted at them. But the principles and the processes are equally valid for large organisations as well.
Okay, I'm just going to ask one last question quickly before we end. So where does Cyber Essentials fit into an organisation's wider cybersecurity strategy?
I think if you decide to go down the Cyber Essentials road, then it has to be at the core of your Cyber Essentials, of your cybersecurity strategy, because it's going to set the foundation for everything else. If you've got the basic building blocks in place, your patching, your identity management, your application management, your firewall controls, all the rest of it, then everything else you can build on top of that. So it's really that foundation that enables you to build a broader cybersecurity strategy. It also helps you to identify, although there are other tools you can use as well, it also starts to help you identify where your risks are, and that will then inform the way that your cyber strategy goes.
Lovely, thank you. So that's all that we've got time for today. So we'll wrap things up there. So firstly, thank you to Stephen for sharing your expertise today. And thank you to Electric Horse for partnering with us on this webinar. We also want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. So we hope you found the session useful and that you've come away with some practical ideas to help strengthen your organisation's cyber resilience. If you'd like to understand where your organisation currently stands, Snow does offer a Cyber Essentials Readiness Assessment to help identify any gaps and provide practical guidance on the next steps towards certification. If you'd like to find out more, then please feel free to get in touch with either Snow or Electric Horse after today's session. And thank you again for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.